Welcome to the final video in our series on structured improvement orientation. And this video is on developing a spirit of Kaizen as a cultural component of your organization. So there's four discussion topics. So first we'll talk about the Japanese definition of motivation, which is stimulating the desire of people to work, creating joy in life, if you will, joy from the work that they're doing, satisfaction in accomplishing things that are important. And how does the work system build upon the cultural foundation and the insights into humanity to create this spirit of Kaizen or cooperation within organizations? Another question, how is standard work structured to assure that this spirit will be reinforced systematically every day? And how do worker responsibility and management responsibility combine to assure peak performance? And then what should be done to begin this journey in your team? So, back in 1989, Yoshio Kondo, who was a co-author of mine on two books, wrote a book on human motivation to describe the whole series of work that had been going on since the 1950s with their way of studying psychological motivation, its application in the theory of psychology, and how it applies into Japanese businesses. And basically, they took a number of instances of things. So they had from the system the United States government developed in World War II for its factories, training with industry. So it was about how do you train housewives basically to work in production lines. And that was basically the improvement of job design. Understanding humanity deals with basically two things. It's about the nature of human beings, how we think, how we act, and how we create and learn, as well as the psychology of Japanese work. And then the third element is coming from the bottom, and that's generated by leadership, is guidance and encouragement from the supervisors. And these three come into the worker and they create an atmosphere where the worker concentrates on self-control. And this is the obligation of each worker. Now, there are some Japanese terms distributed throughout here that describe the different systems, and those are for further study at higher levels in continual improvement. But basically, the goal is to achieve collaborative harmony in the flow. And remember, Taiichi Ohno had talked about harmony as being the desired output. And the Japanese word for that is wa, which also is the word for teams that are operating collectively in a synchronous way. And so the components of self-control are respect for people or for humanity, continual improvement as an attitude, reflective mindfulness, and that's this ability to go back and think about what we've been doing and gain lessons from it, and then taking personal ownership for the quality of the work we do. So all of those are fundamental elements of building self-control. And then as people go on that journey, they start improving their ability. As they improve their ability, they become more confident and able to do things with other people, and they become willing participants in groups. And then as they get into the groups more and more deeply, they start getting a keen interest in the work other people are doing. What are the people who are giving me my inputs doing? What are the people who take my outputs? What do they use it for? And then finally, we end up having teamwork. And so this ownership, the responsibility, this whole idea of self-control is central to the Japanese system. Now, it's interesting, in 1956, Peter Drucker, in his book, Practice of Management, talked about management by objectives and self-control. In the rest of the Western world, they dropped the and self-control. On the Japanese side, they emphasized it. And this is a major difference in terms of management techniques and lessons learned between the West and the East about this idea. Because in the West, they want to have a command and control system where business leaders tell you what to do and you respond unquestioningly. Whereas in the Asian system, they want people to develop this commitment to following something by participating in the achievement of the decisions and the actual outcome that is necessary from that. Now, you all have probably heard about 5S and so forth, but I want to just emphasize that 3S is the daily discipline of standard work. So every day in Japan begins with Siri Sitan. And that means beginning the organization of the day. Siri finds the waste Ceton plans its elimination. That's basically the daily work schedule and work activities at each group and getting ready to prepare them. That's the daily morning meeting. The end of the day is CSU. And this is basically, it begins as a standalone operation and it removes the waste produced during that day. And it brings the state of order back to the system. And as you go further and further in this, CSU ratchets up to higher levels of cleanliness and higher levels of the pursuit of this muda elimination. So Siri is acting as a muda detector. CISO has the attention to detail that forces the act into Kaizen. Now, when we take a look at the last two activities in the 5S, Seketsu and Shitsuke, Seketsu is basically a disciplined persistence of the 3S process. And so what it transitions into total productive maintenance. And Seketsu is saying, let's get a higher level of purity. Let's go deeper into this idea of making this more and more pure, and let's take it to the point of hygiene. And so this is ratcheting up the level of performance. And so that's basically a Kaizen activity. So Seketsu and Shitsuke came out of the total productive maintenance. Kaizen is a term that is used in the quality movement in Japan by the Japanese Union of Scientists and Engineers and the Japanese Society for Quality Control. So it's an older word and more broadly used. Shitsuke is talking about the discipline of improvement of the 3S as a Kaizen activity, and it's acting to train and encourage workers in the discipline of improvement, which is the responsibility of the supervisor. And in some organizations, they add a sixth S called Shukan, which is the results of the daily management system is compliance with standard work, and it's habitual. In other words, we wouldn't think about not following standard work. It is part of what we do through our reflective process in our daily work cycle. Now, top-down flow creates organizational waste. Sometimes it's the person who's planning the work has more influence on successful outcome than the person who's actually doing it. And this is sometimes called the invisible factory. And it's created because there are unintended consequences of poor management action or inadvertent effects of management action, inaction, if you will, that have a much stronger impact on constancy of the ultimate quality. So we have to consider executive education a priority. It's not enough to train workers, we have to train the executives. And we do not train the executives in the same thing we train the workers because they have different focus areas for Mori, Mora, and Muda. So what we start seeing is that when we look at this in history, Dr. Deming in his book Out of the Crisis said that 15% of the problems in an organization are originated by the workers. The remaining 85 were management's responsibility. But the tradition in Western management is to blame the workers for all poor productivity and mistakes. In his book, Just in Time for Today and Tomorrow, Ono said, I am not sure where the 85% of Professor Deming's presidential responsibility comes from. In most cases, a serious lack of humane leadership in the area of workplace management on the part of the president probably existed. For American management in the past, 85% indicates an inconceivable sense of responsibility. I think that Toyota production system success depends on the president assuming 100% responsibility for the quality of work. The tradition in Japanese management is to accept responsibility for performance of the whole organization, and this is why the leader will actually commit, if you will, the act of retiring or basically offering their resignation as an apology for poor work done by the company in behalf of customers. So Taiichi Ono says, also, you can view office work the same as you do work from the production floor. You can have a Gemba philosophy for administrative work by identifying your administrative Gemba. Managerial departments do not think they need supervision. They cannot see the work. It's invisible work. White-collar workers tend to get rotated out of their position. That is why nobody is looking at what's happening with their work. After a few years of doing one thing, they move on to another position. Nobody really checks to see what they did while they were there. So here's the problem. If we start seeing the Peter principle, work expands to saturate the time available. So we have the three levels of the organization, executive, Gemba 2, function which is the business or Gemba 2, and then process, which is Gemba 1. Value is produced in Gemba 1 at the workers. When that is operating to full capacity, the whole box is green. However, what we see is if the management team says we need to do a change, they have a special project. So the extra job comes in and they say, okay, this is something we need to do. It's easier for them to do. They assign it to a team. It doesn't really use up all of the time at the business division level, but all the work is done where? In Gemba 1. And so we're asking the workers to start time sharing, do extra roles, extra jobs, spend extra time. Extra job number 2. We have the same thing. So if job number 1 was SAP HANA, and job number 2 is we have to then redo our reporting system. Job number 3 is, we have to do because the reporting system's not right, we have to do our master data system. And job number 4 is now we have to actually redo our quality management system. And the next thing we know, what we've done is that the mandatory work that's been mandated by the management team of low personal value to the people at the front line squeezes out their time, if you will, creating an overload on their capacity, and that creates frustration and causes a reduction in their efficiency. Now, the problem is when we start trying to find out where is this happening or what's going on, we start seeing costs are accumulated and allocated to overhead in all product lines where we don't have easily or readily identifiable sources that say this is what created the cost. So we might have material variances, labor variances, transportation variances occurring throughout the organization. But what we do is we then inflate the cost of goods sold and reduce profitability of all product lines because these unabsorbed, if you will, overhead expenses get spread across all areas, changing our pricing model, distorting it, and also not allocating proper expenses to those products, making them look artificially more profitable than they actually are. So regularly execute the check step. So current process is the as is. That gives us the current results. Our new way of working, this is the should be process. We have to do an improvement activity. We have to make the change. That's this movement through SDCA and into PDCA. Once we've done it, we see the new results and we can start understanding. So basically, everyone has to do 2 jobs: do the work and improve the way of working. So making a work process visible allows us to discover the best way of working, and then setting intermediate goals to achieve the long-term goal and identify what must be improved. That's the first step. So follow the 4 steps of the UDSO model. First step is to improvement is to understand the process. Second step, document process and its system of measurements. Third step, prioritize those areas that are producing the most waste, simplify them. And finally, when standard processes cannot be further improved and whenever performance is required, then it's time to design a new process and seek optimization opportunities through automation. So here's the activity for you. It's a commitment to self-control. How do you participate in the continual review of standard work procedures? What measurements are used to assure that the quality of your work meets the customer's deliverable requirements? How do you cooperate within your team and across work units to consistently deliver high-quality productive results? What is your personal responsibility for delivery of quality in your work? Well, I know it's going to be a challenge to start taking these things on to move forward, but this is the requirement if we're going to be meeting the goals that we're setting for our company in the future performance and in the new generations of competition which we'll be facing. Thank you very much.